Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Vaska, and this is my wife, Camille, and we welcome you to our Sunday supper. Sunday is normally a time for us to gather for worship, for sports, for recreation, and of course for family. But we can't do that right now as we separate to come together to fight the coronavirus. So we want to welcome you to join our family, and you'll see our son Grant here in a minute. And our campaign, and we're going to do this every Sunday until the virus is defeated. What we're trying to do is come together to create a community of people that want to bring common sense back to our politics. This week, we're going to have a special session of our Sunday supper, where we're going to share 3 stories of hope and kindness that we hope will give you some hope about the future and what comes after we defeat this virus. There is a light at the end of every dark tunnel, and these 3 stories will help us all to remember that. I also really believe that we have an opportunity to make something better out of our community as a result of this pandemic. Our first job, of course, will be to heal the sick, and our brave doctors and nurses are doing a wonderful job of that. Our second job, which is about to begin very soon, is to heal our economy. But I think our third opportunity, and it may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity, is to begin healing our sick and divided politics. I'll talk more about how I will do that as your next Attorney General in our future Sunday suppers. Now, I also want to say that if you are in a position where you can help others right now, I hope that you will join Camille and I in donating to your local food bank or to one of the statewide groups that distributes food and money to these organizations. They're running out of food, and it's very, very important that we all, to the extent we can, we help them. My family relied on food banks when I was in high school after my father had a stroke. We only relied on them for a short time to get us through, but I can tell you how important they are and what a difference your contribution will make. As I said earlier, today we will have 3 uplifting stories of hope and opportunity. The first will be from our state treasurer, Duane Davidson, and he will talk about how he was elected to that office despite a personal tragedy. The second will be from State Representative Alex Ybarra from Quincy, and he will tell us how a school teacher helped unlock his great potential that put him on a path to success that included becoming a rocket scientist. And finally, I'll share one of my family stories, the story of my father and how a Lutheran minister saved him from the gulags of Soviet Russia and unlocked his opportunity to come to this country. But first, we're going to take one of your questions from last week. As I mentioned last week, we hope to make this more interactive as we grow into the technology. But for now, we're going to take 2 of your questions from last week. Camille will ask the first one, and I will answer it. So I encourage you to continue to send questions in on the live stream. We're looking at all of them, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But for now, Camille's got one from last week. So go ahead, Camille.
I do. So first, thanks to Matt McCoy from Spokane, who asked, when he was Attorney General, Senator Gorton pioneered consumer protection public policy. Can more work be done to protect our consumers, especially our seniors and those who live with disabilities?
Thank you for that question, Matt. That's a really wonderful question. Consumer protection has always been one of the core functions of the Attorney General's office, and I have led my firm's consumer protection and antitrust practice for decades. So I'm very excited to serve in that capacity of protecting consumers. There are definitely things that I will do as the next Attorney General. I think starting with not diverting funds from consumer protection to pay for partisan national lawsuits, which is something that Attorney General Bob Ferguson is doing. Consumers, in particular senior citizens, but many of our consumers are very vulnerable in this state to cybercrime. We have among the highest rates of cybercrime in the entire country. And so one of the things I will do as Attorney General is create a cybercrime unit within the Attorney General's office to enforce. We have a very tough cybercrime law in this state, but no one's enforcing it. So that's one way that I will amp up and bring to a new higher level our consumer protection in this state. Thank you, Camille.
You're welcome.
Okay, you're excused. Our first guest today is our state treasurer, Duane Davidson. Before he was elected state treasurer in 2016, Duane was the county treasurer for Benton County in the Tri-Cities part of our state for many, many years. Duane, I didn't know this, but Duane was born in Carnation and attended Tolt High School, which is not very far from here, before he moved to Central Washington. Duane, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, Duane. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank
where
you.
Where are you spending your Easter Sunday?
Well, I'm on, those that know Carnation's history know that it's the home of the contented cows. Carnation Farms that's a little, and I am on my boat, which is called the Contented. My boat is my residence when I'm in Olympia, which is most all the time. And so that's the name of my boat, the Contented, and I'm on it, and it's a glorious day out here.
Well, that's wonderful, Duane. And can you tell us how the virus is affecting our state's treasury?
Well, actually, first of all, great question. First of all, I want to talk to you about the operations because it's essential. The treasurer's office is an essential office to make sure that the payments continue to be made and that money flows to the proper agencies and where it's needed. And one of the advantages we had in the treasurer's office is for some time, we didn't anticipate, at least speaking personally, I didn't anticipate this type of pandemic virus, but we have been doing disaster preparedness for some time. And we have a policy in the office of having everybody work at home one day a month, or most all the staff work one day a month at home so that they are sure that their VPN connections and they have the equipment and everything to help facilitate that. We've been doing that since I got there, and that proved to be extremely beneficial when this hit because we were able, it was still kind of a heavy lift. We had some coordination things to do, but a lot less stress than some other state agencies went through to be able to get everybody at home so they could still be functioning properly. And I can attest that I went out and bought myself a little $10 desk at the Target and set up here on the boat, and I've been working from my boat at home, and everybody's been at home, and the functions of the office continue on, which I'm delighted to say. The treasurer's office is impacted a great deal by the workload of coordinating efforts as these federal monies start to come into the state. We'll be working with OFM and others to make sure that those resources are allocated out as there's to the various agencies as they are prescribed to do.
Great. Well, thank you, Duane. And now we would like to have you share with us a story that I've heard several times, and that every time I hear it, I feel better about life. It really is an uplifting story about your journey from Benton County Treasurer to Treasurer of the state of Washington, and how you overcame some challenges in order to become treasurer.
Well, thank you. Yes, I was the county treasurer for Benton County for I was in my fourth term, and life was good. My youngest daughter was just about ready to graduate from high school, and she was in her senior year. And I had heard the news that the treasurer was not running again. And so I decided that I was not going to, I had no anticipation, no plans on running, but I was solicited by some folks from mainstream Republican organization to run. And my first reaction was a great reluctance because life was kind of good. I hate to kind of admit to that now because that's not any attitude a politician should have, that life is good. I've built all this stuff. I've achieved all this. So now I'm just going to kind of rest and relax. But that's the attitude that I did have. But they kept working me until they finally got me convinced to throw my hat in the ring. And quite frankly, I didn't think I had much of a shot, Republican from Eastern Washington. But the campaign picked up and was very, very successful at the very first. I was kind of amazed about the kind of support I was getting. I was amazed about how well it was going. And I was actually at the mainstream event in Leavenworth that weekend that I was there, away from my family. That tragedy hit at home, and I lost my wife unexpectedly. And I went home and I told my family, I knew better. I knew better at the very beginning. I should never even got in this race. I got to be here for you guys. I'm going to announce that I'm going to pull out of the race, and that's it. Well, I procrastinated on most things I do, and I procrastinated in getting an official letter out. And I drove into my to my house, and all three of my adult children were parked outside. Cars were parked outside. I knew something was up because they were not invited to be there that day. And it was an intervention, and they basically said, we think it's of everybody's best interest that you continue to run. And at that point in time, still very reluctant to change my mind, my youngest daughter, who just about ready to graduate from high school, she was just 17, almost ready to turn 18 at the time. She said, "Dad, I got an interesting proposition for you. If you decide to postpone or to stay in this race, I'll postpone college for a quarter and be your campaign manager, and we'll use this as a bonding time to kind of get through all this, and I think it'll be good for both of us." Well, father instincts kicks in right immediately. I think a 17-year-old girl running a statewide campaign, politics can be kind of rough. No, I don't. Being campaign manager, being subject to the negativity that can associate around. That's something I didn't really immediately take a great interest in doing. But she told me I told her I'd have to let her know in the morning, and I'd pray about it and think about it, let her know in the morning at breakfast. And when I left the room, she said, "Well, remember, you've told us girls," because I have 2 daughters and a son, "girls can do anything boys can do, Dad. And so just pray on that." And so I did. And the very next day, when I came up and announced that if she was game, if she was willing to do it, let's do it. And great delight came to her face, and she immediately took out her smartphone and Googled how to be a campaign manager. She had no idea. And the rest is history. Pretty soon, she was talking in front of groups of 200-300 people in replacement of me. So much so that one of the candidates for office at the time told me that he thought she did a lot better speech than I did.
Yes, well, she is a great speaker, Duane, and that's a really wonderful story. And I wasn't going to put a plug in here for Mainstream Republicans of Washington, but you are one of our greatest achievements. Folks at Mainstream thought you would be a good state treasurer, and there's other parts of your story that we don't have time for now about how you got the call at Home Depot and thought someone was pranking you, and they said they wanted you to run for state treasurer. So it's a really wonderful story. As you may or may not know, I just stepped down as chair of the board of Mainstream this week. I've been the chair for the last 3 years, and I was really proud to have you as one of my board members for most of that time, Duane. Really wonderful. And John Naring, who's the mayor of Marysville, very accomplished mayor of Marysville, will be, has stepped in as the next chair. So Duane, thank you for that wonderful story.
Thank you.
I've heard a rumor that there's a smell of barbecue near your boat there. So I encourage you to,
just a few boats down.
Get in your whatever dinghy or whatever boat you use to get around the marina there and see if you can't get invited to that party.
That's what it's called.
Really yeah.
Yeah, I think I might be so bold to just roll by very slowly and see if they invite.
Yeah, see if they invite you in. Well, thank you, Duane, for taking the time, and good luck dealing with all of the impacts of the coronavirus on the state treasury, and good luck on your campaign for re-election.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and happy Easter.
Okay, happy Easter to you. Okay, now we're going to take another viewer question from last week. My son Grant has made a return appearance. He is going for the world's longest hair. we're threatening to give him a bowl cut here, but he's refusing so far. Anyway, Grant is working from home with us. He, as we said last week, he has a job in the Bay Area, but they're locked down, so he's here. So Grant, what's your tough question for this week?
Well, tough question comes from Ann Donnelly in Vancouver. So she asks, I have a strong interest in mental health, and I wondered if the Attorney General has a role to play in improving our response to the mental health crisis.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, Ann, if you're watching, for that question. Mental health is in crisis in our state in many, many ways, and it's actually a big contributor to our homelessness crisis. I've said that in order to deal with the homelessness crisis, we need to, in part, provide compassion, and in part, we need to make sure that we enforce the rule of law. The compassion part really comes into play with people that are mentally ill and have those challenges. Rob McKenna has talked about the convening power of the Attorney General to bring all of the interested parties and groups, government, not-for-profit, religious groups, together to come up with a plan for our state to deal with this crisis. And that's what I plan to do. I also, as mentioned in response to my earlier, or the earlier question from your mom, will stop the practice of diverting funds from programs that the Attorney General has in the past funded to support groups that are working on mental illness problems. Stop diverting those funds to pay for partisan lawsuits. So that's what I will do as your next Attorney General, to begin dealing with the mental illness crisis we have in our state. Thank you, Grant.
Welcome.
Okay. Our second of three stories, stories of hope, is from Representative Alex Ybarra, who represents the 13th District in Central Washington. Representative Ybarra was a rocket scientist before he returned to his hometown of Quincy and became involved in politics. Alex, are you with us today?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you for joining us, Alex.
Sure.
Where are you spending your Easter Sunday?
In Quincy, Washington. So nice, beautiful day, great Easter day.
Wonderful. I see something on television behind you, but it doesn't look like sports.
Okay,
Because there aren't any.
let me move. How about that?
Oh, that's better.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Oh, no problem. And how are things going in your district in Quincy and in Central Washington?
Central Washington is doing just fine. Unfortunately, Quincy happens to be the epicenter of coronavirus. We've got in Grant County, we have 119 cases. Unfortunately, Quincy has 44 of them. And so we've really locked down the town pretty hard. The town of Quincy has got a group of about 25 folks that meet every Friday to try to figure out ways to eliminate the coronavirus in Quincy and try to keep those numbers as where they're at now. So I don't do anything worse. So it is kind of tough in town, but around Central Washington, it's not too bad.
Okay, well, anything else you want to let folks know before we get to your great story of hope?
No, I just want to wish everybody a happy Easter. It's a great day to be here. I've contacted all my family, and unfortunately, they can't make it over to Quincy just because of coronavirus and things. So it's been nice just contacting and talking to the folks that I love very much. And so hopefully everybody's in the same boat as I am.
Okay, now I have heard your great story several times, and I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but it's such a wonderful story because it connects all of us to our teachers. We all had teachers that at one point or another saw some potential in us and gave us that little extra nudge, or in some cases yank, to help us achieve our potential. And I really love this story, Alex, and I don't want to steal your thunder. So go ahead and tell the viewers about that story of hope that we're sharing today.
Sure. So obviously I'm Mexican, and my parents were migrant workers, and so they would come from Texas, down south Texas. They worked there for a bit, traveled to California with about 20 other Hispanic families, come to California, finish work there, go to Oregon, then Washington, then to Illinois, right outside of Chicago, and then back down to Texas. And that was a route that they took, which obviously is why they call them migrant workers. All of them were Mexicans, so none of them could hardly speak English except for the dads. So by the time I was born, my parents were in Quincy, Washington, and we were, again, all Spanish speakers. All my parents' friends were all Spanish speakers. So by the time I got to kindergarten, I couldn't speak English. And so back then, this is back a couple of years back, and if you spoke Spanish in elementary school, you would be sent to the principal's office. You did it twice, then you'd be kicked out of school for 3 days, and if you did it a third time, you'd be kicked out of school for the entire year. So not knowing English, I didn't speak at all. Just basically just made hand motions about needing to go to the bathroom and or going to get food or going to go in recess, but not a lot of talk that came out of me. Even when we were reading, it was really tough for me just because it was a different language. I didn't understand it. So by the time I got to fourth grade, I couldn't read. And so first day of school in fourth grade, my teacher sat me down and, asked me to read a book, and I just couldn't do it. So the next day she said I'm going to go to a different classroom. So she put me in special ed. And so I was in the special ed classroom for a couple months, just because she didn't know what to do with me. I couldn't speak, I couldn't read, I couldn't do anything. So for me, I just felt very, very, very stupid. And I just thought I was the stupidest kid in the whole world. And so by the time I got to sixth grade, I learned how to read, how to write, got a special ed, but I was pretty good at math. And so by the time I got to eighth grade, I was a pretty good math student and still struggled with my English and my reading and my writing, but was coming around. I was a good student. And so the way it kind of worked in Quincy back then is that we could choose before we went to high school to be in higher level algebra or lower level general math. So I decided to take general math. And after a math class, my teacher asked me why I took general math and why I didn't take the higher level algebra. And again, this is back in the 70s and stuff. And I kind of said, I'm Mexican. All Mexicans take general math. None of them take algebra. And I said, my brothers and sisters all took general math, so I'm not going to take algebra. And I also told her that I'm stupid. I'm not very smart. I'm special ed. I'm just not smart. And she said, Alex, you're one of my top students in my math class. You need to take algebra. I said, no, I'm just dumb. And she said, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. I'm dumb. And she said, you're not. Look at the scorebooks here. She showed me the scorebooks, and it scored highest on all 4 or 5 tests that I'd taken that year. And she said, you're one of my top students. You have to take algebra. And I said, no, I will flunk. And it was a feisty old gal, and she picked up the phone off her desk and she called the high school and said, move Alex to algebra. He's going to be in algebra, not in general math. And I said, you can't do that. I'm going to flunk. And she just kind of said, Alex, shooed me out of the class and said, you're going to do just fine. Just get out of here. Well, sure enough, I went to high school and took algebra, geometry, algebra 2 and pre-calc, aced them all. Went on to Central Washington University and became a math major. So I've got a Bachelor of Science in Mathematics, all due to Mrs. Lambeck, and just give me a little encouragement that I needed. That I think all of us need every once in a while. Need a little encouragement from folks that aren't your friends, but just somebody that believes in you, that tells you that you can make it. And sure enough, as soon as I finished up my degree in mathematics, I got a job with a company called Rocket Research Company in Redmond, Washington, and they made rockets and spacecraft, and they're a military contractor for Boeing and different companies across the world. So I was lucky enough to work on spatial programs, on satellites, on the Mars landers programs, working and doing a lot of work for those guys. So at the end of the day, because of Mrs. Lambeck and because of her encouragement, I became a rocket scientist and worked at Rocket Research for 15 years. And soon after, moved back home to Quincy and just became a school board member for 8 years in Quincy and sort of got involved in politics. And next thing you know, on the state representative for District 13. And all due to a little encouragement I got from a very wise, very smart teacher that believed in me. And again, I didn't believe in myself, but she did. And it was obviously made all the difference in my life. And I'm sure there's somebody out there that you could probably look at in your life that encourages you to do a little bit better. So that's the story.
What a wonderful story, an act of kindness. You went from special ed to being a rocket scientist to being a state representative, and you've only been on the job, what, for a year, a little over a year as a state representative, but you're already making a huge difference. And I know you're mentoring the next generation of leaders in Central Washington, and it's going to be very exciting to see if your mentorship can mean as much to them as your teacher's mentorship was to you. It's just a wonderfully uplifting story. And thank you so much for sharing it with us, Alex.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for inviting me to the program.
Okay, enjoy. Happy Easter. I hope you find some of the chocolate hid around your house if you have some of that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. The final of 3 stories today is a story from my dad, Carl Vaska. And some of you may know this already. He was born on a collective farm near Smolensk in the Soviet Union. That area was invaded by the Germans in World War II, and they basically took everyone and brought them west to serve the Nazi Empire. My father ended up on a farm, or a series of farms, in Latvia, and as the front moved, the group he was with moved with it. And so at the end of the war, he ended up among the huddled masses in Germany, and ultimately in a refugee camp. Well, Stalin wasn't real keen on having his former citizens in the West. So he sent agents through all of the refugee camps looking for anyone that had been in the Soviet Union when the war began. And they were quite ruthless in their efforts. And someone ratted my father out. So he's now a young teenager, and he was going to be sent back. And they called it repatriation, but repatriation meant one of 2 things. Either you were shot as soon as you got back into the Soviet Union, or you were sent to the prison camps called the gulags. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote a book about these called The Gulag Archipelago. These were brutal work camps where many, many people died from the hard labor. So my father was going to be sent back to the Soviet Union, repatriated, most likely going to a gulag. And he was sitting on a curb crying, and a Lutheran minister came across him and asked him what was going on. And the minister said, well, we'll fix this problem for you. And so the Lutheran minister wrote up a new birth certificate for my father saying he was from Latvia, not from the Soviet Union. And his first name became his last name, which is my last name, Vaska. And the Lutheran minister, gave him a new first name, Carlos. And because of that act of grace, my father had the opportunity. First off, he wasn't sent to the gulags in the Soviet Union. And secondly, he had an opportunity to immigrate to this country along with many other refugees. So it was really quite an act of redemption by that Lutheran minister. I think of that story every Easter, when I go to Lutheran church, which we did today virtually, not in person. And it's always a story that I think of when times are tough, and I'm looking for a little bit of hope. So with that, we're now at the end of this Sunday supper. I want to thank you for joining Camille and Grant, who are off the camera here at our home, and Josh Amato is behind the camera doing all the technical work. I think these 3 stories from State Treasurer Duane Davidson, from State Representative Alex Ybarra, and from my father show that there is hope no matter how tough times seem to be. And I really believe that there's hope for our state right around the corner, that we are healing our sick, and we will heal our sick. We will then heal our economy, and then we will begin the task of healing our politics. I ask you or invite you to join us next week for our Sunday supper at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you have questions about our campaign, please visit us at mikevaska.com.